Okay, so before we get into the program, I was encouraged to give a few kind of slides on what we're seeing at Artillery Intelligence, which is my intelligence firm, in terms of some of the trends we're tracking. And this is actually the spot that Tom popularized very early on as that just awesome recap. And you guys all remember this, that brain dump recap that was just so much great stuff. We realized we didn't really have time for that, and out of respect for Tom, I won't do like a Tom impersonation. We're going to do something slightly smaller. Instead of all of the news of the last month, just a few kind of things we've seen in the last week that are pertinent to tonight's topic of head-worn AR, and then some data slides to just kind of set the stage for our great speakers tonight. So first, just a few things that stood out to me as happening in the last week. So one of them is, another week, another Apple smart glasses rumor. This latest one coming from Bloomberg last week, really verifying a lot of stuff that we have already heard. But really one of the points that it wanted to validate was that 2020 is indeed the year. I'm still a little bit skeptical on 2020, and that's something I'll come back to. But basing this on some good sources, they're looking at something that is going to be a iPhone tethered kind of notification layer for kind of iOS notifications. A lot of these things we've seen before, and that aligns with some of the thinking we've been doing about a V1 device that could be a notification layer that really evolved. I like to think of it like the iPhone 1 did from that point. But there's just still going to be a lot of kind of signals that continue to come out that we can triangulate what we're going to end up seeing. And a lot of it is probably going to surprise us. But I have a lot more to say about that I'll circle back to in a second when we get to some of the data. Another interesting kind of notable news item was Samsung filed a design patent for a phone-tethered binocular set of AR glasses. There's a mock-up here. It's also notable that the Electronic Times reported, it's a Korean publication, reported that Samsung is actually in process of building custom chips for the Facebook AR device that it announced at OC6. So that's going to be something to watch. And last but definitely not least, we're very excited to report that Tilt 5's Kickstarter ended just yesterday. The final numbers are in. Their funding goal was $450,000. They 4x'd that. It was something like 1.7 something billion. Million, I'm sorry. Of course. Yeah. So yes, 1.76 million in funding from about 3,000 backers. Anyone in here back that, by the way? Nice. So you guys are all probably familiar with Tilt 5. For those unfamiliar, it is a kind of a stationary AR experiences that utilizes glasses and this kind of photo reflective board. And what I love about them and the way that they've talked about this before is that we've all been amped on this idea of AR everywhere. So the AR cloud, mobile glasses that are kind of this persistent AR level that follow us, and that is indeed the vision that we're all excited about. But until we get to that point, what about the concept of instead of AR everywhere, nail the experience of AR somewhere? So just like one stationary experience. And that kind of line of thinking, I think, has allowed them to do some interesting things from a UX perspective and kind of sidestep a lot of typical design challenges that we see in the pursuit of AR everywhere. So I love what they're doing. It's going to be very fun. And the fact that it's a platform. It's really a platform upon which a lot of people are going to build creative experiences. They already have partnerships with a lot of IP for games like Dungeons and Dragons type games and tower defense games, but that's going to be just fun to watch. So the other thing that's notable there is that we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel in the trough of disillusionment, right? We're starting to see these compelling devices that are getting closer to market. And I always like to go back to this slide because it's important that we're talking a lot of these days about enterprise AR, which of course is very important. But the addressable market, the eventual addressable market is going to be a lot more scalable with consumer because there are 7 billion humans on the planet. So this is a chart from Intel that I always go back to. I think the years are off, but conceptually it's very interesting that we're going to see an intersection in the trend line of adoption between enterprise AR and consumer AR, because in enterprise we will eventually reach saturation and hit a ceiling, but then consumer will continue growing, again, because there are 7 billion humans on the planet. So I think that's interesting, and that kind of informs some of our numbers that I'll give quickly as it kind of leads into some of the discussion we're going to have tonight. These are our AR glasses projections. You can see clearly there's an inflection we're projecting around 2022. We base a lot of that on speculation about AR glasses, the halo effect they'll have on the rest of the market. Still very low volume. These charts look kind of daunting, but we're still talking about, at most, still like, 3 million units by 2023. To put that into perspective, there are about 3 billion, smartphones as an installed base globally. But the key point is that inflection point, which may or may not be right depending on what Apple ends up doing. But the point is we see that as being influential. And again, back to the previous slide, right around between 2021 and 2022, it kind of flips in terms of the enterprise grade installed base, or say unit sales, annual sales, to then becoming more consumer heavy going out to 2023. We believe Apple is going to have that effect. As we see what Apple does, we'll probably have to course correct in terms of the actual timing of when that inflection is. But the point is, we're kind of projecting that inflection. Similar, if you look at installed base, which is of course different in terms of cumulative units in market, we see that growing to about 5 million by 2023, not 5 billion. And the point is, by 2023, about 3.5 million of which will be consumer, and about 1.8 or so million of those will be the presumed Apple glasses. Now, I'll leave you with, before we go to the panel, something that is more of just kind of like a wild, crazy speculation. And there's, of course, like the questions of when, which we just went over, but what about the questions of what? So there's lots of speculation on what these glasses will be. Earlier, the Bloomberg article I referenced, they were talking about how it's, V1 will be more of a notification layer, a passive display, accessory to your iPhone. I think that still may be the case, but I've been thinking, what if instead of that, or in addition to that, we're talking about an entertainment device? And this goes back to some stuff that Tom has talked about in the past as, somewhat of an entertainment device. And I've been kind of batting that around my head for a while, but last week there was this interesting piece of news, and I was talking to Nigel from RealMax earlier about this. He's still in the room, or is he? Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. The variable opacity, and this is, let me back up. They've filed a patent, a utility patent for glasses that utilize this variable opacity lens. So where that goes could be interesting in terms of having a use case where you can have a fully opaque, occluded experience that is high contrast and therefore potentially optimized for entertainment, for watching movies. And then you can also have a multimodal experience where it also has a very low opacity situation where it either has a notification layer, or you can just see the world around you and walk around. So in practical terms, that means if you're at the airport, you want to have notifications, you want to have flight information, you want to have messaging, but then you board the flight and you're at 30,000 feet and you may want to, at that point, zone out and go into an entertainment experience. And the fact that that high opacity enables or sidesteps some of the traditional challenges when it comes to optical combiners and AR glasses and not being able to see black, this kind of high contrast occluded experience, the question is, could that be this multimodal experience? And of course, again, I've prefaced that with pure speculation. There's a lot of technical nuance that might preclude some of these ideas, but the point is we're starting to see these clues in lots of different places, and it's going to be about triangulating them in order to kind of speculate what we might see, whether it be Apple Glasses V1 or just something we may see further off in the future. Some of these clues are just starting to get interesting and fun to watch. So with that, what we're going to do is going to go over to Stefan, who is a representative of our host company, Verizon, to tell you a little bit about what they're up to here at Verizon, and then we will go into the panel from there. Stefan, please welcome Stefan.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome everybody to our 5G lab here in San Francisco. So we established our 5G labs to inspire, explore, and build new technologies and applications enabled by 5G. So the keyword here is really, we want to be an enabler. We want to be an enabler for the ecosystem. We want to be an enabler for all the cool products that are being built and that are leveraging the 5G network. So pretty much the products that all of you are building here, and we want to enable that. So looking at the ecosystem, looking at 5G, what we see, what are the key expectations of 5G? So it's low latency, single-digit millisecond latency, peak data rates of up to 20 gigabits per second, so gigabit speeds, a massive connection density, up to 1 million devices per square kilometer, so that's 100 times more connected devices compared to today, And then everything around efficiency, whether it's power efficiency of the devices that we carry around, whether it's compute efficiency of the devices that we carry around and that leverage some sort of cloud computing or edge computing, mobile edge computing, MEC as we call it. So these are the key expectations that we see, that we put out there. And that's the vision, how we communicate the vision of 5G, how Verizon communicates the vision of 5G. So it's high speed, extreme mobile broadband, gigabit speeds, low latency, single-digit latency, especially important for critical machine communications, and then the massive scale, massive IoT communications, whether it's a city infrastructure, smart cities, smart factories, all the devices that will be connected in the future to the cellular network. And that chart here, that's kind of the work that we do with players like you, with our partners in our 5G labs. So we look at your product, we look at the features and the functionalities of that product, and then we try to chart it. Is it a use case? Is it a product that requires more responsiveness? Or is it a product that requires more bandwidth? And then we compare it first to the other products out there that are in the same use case category, or we work with you and see, okay, what kind of features and functionalities does your product have, and what are the requirements for the network for these features and functionalities? So which features and functionalities do you have on your roadmap? What can you build? And what are the requirements in terms of responsiveness and bandwidth? So that's pretty interesting stuff that we have done with some partners before. And I think the feedback we got from there, it really helps the companies to see what can be included in the product roadmap, what can be built in the near future, what's a little bit more out there in the far future. And that's kind of the offer that we always have on the table here. We have a 5G test network where we invite you to come and collaborate with us. Yeah, so this is a very high level kind of categories or buckets that we have of use cases. So, and that's usually the conversations, how we start the conversations with you. Is it more a high bandwidth download use case? So a lot of VR, AR, obviously. Is it more a high bandwidth upload use case? So we've done a lot of things around video, intelligent video, and all that, leveraging the 5G network, the network of the future. Is it a low latency use case? Very important in telematics, in self-driving cars, and all the communications of devices, vehicles that are moving and require real-time information. And then, of course, high-density use cases, as mentioned, city infrastructure, smart cities, smart factories, the industrial IoT as one thing here, for example. And that's how it works. So we really try, the 5G Labs team tries to be very agile, to really collaborate and connect with you as entrepreneurs out there or as innovators out there. So usually we have an initial contact. That's kind of the first conversation where we see, okay, what's the 5G angle? What's the 5G thesis of what you were doing, what you were building? And then we quickly sign NDA partnership agreement, and we meet for a more deep dive, in-depth conversation to really understand, okay, what is it, where 5G comes in, where 5G can help you, and what could we do together? And then follow the next step, get you set up in our lab, onboard your product on our 5G test beds. We do the testing together, and after that, we have lessons learned together, and then it's really up to you as a partner where you want to take it. So there's a lot of things that we have done where we put partners on stage and featured your products, your service, featured the work that we've done together. Some other super interesting partners we have tested with, they wanted to stay in stealth mode, and that's totally fine for us as well. You're still very welcome to come to our 5G labs and work with us and test with us. And that's kind of what we believe. It's really a partnership, and a collaboration creates new products and services with greater value. So all of us can reach our goals quicker. What's in there for you? You get early access to a 5G trial test bed with all different kinds of features, functionalities, low latency compute capabilities. And then based on that, we work together. Do we want to demo something together? Do we just want to gather performance data? Do we want to publish lessons learned together? What is the early user feedback on a 5G product that we are onboarding in the test bed? And then everything can go from there. We can use our PR and media machine to help you to boost your venture as well. That's pretty much it, what I wanted to put out there. That's my name, my email. Please reach out to me. Looking forward to dive deeper into the conversations with all of you.
Thanks, Stefan. That's great. And we'll keep that up for a second, and also we'll have a lot of follow-up stuff through Meetup. We'll include Stefan's information on that. So next we're going to go right into our panel. And to do that, I'll just introduce Tom. You all know Tom, and we're excited to have Tom back. The prodigal son returns. Tom, why don't you come up, and then you can kind of introduce the panel from there.
Thank you, Mike and Emily. It is amazing to be back here at AWE Nite SF. Things have changed a little bit with me. You may have heard I am now at Eighth Wall. We equip developers, agencies, and brands with powerful tools to create augmented reality in the web. And we have huge news, which Eric, the CEO, is here to tell you about later. But I am thrilled to have a conversation about headworn AR here at AWE Nite SF. And to do this, we need people to talk to. And these are the people I'm going to be calling up now, including Peng, who is the CEO and engineer for Kura AR, Preston Platt, CTO of Rock Paper Reality, Nigel Burton, CEO of RealMax, and Aysegul Yonet, senior cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, who works with spatial computing, mixed reality, and AI. Big round of applause for our panelists, everybody. So, the way that I've constructed this panel conversation, this is a big line, hi guys, good to see you, is to really focus around the technologies, around the hardware. We might dabble within some of the use cases. Obviously, use cases and applications are extremely important, but we only have 30 minutes together, so that this is kind of where the conversation is going to be pointed. And as per Mike's fantastic data from AR Insider, I wanted to first start where glasses are currently being utilized the most, and that's at work. So my question to the panel, and I'm going to open this up, and you all have mics, so just jump in and argue and debate and agree. And, yeah, exactly. The question is, what are the demands from enterprise customers today, and are glasses living up to them? Are they meeting them?
Who wants to take it?
I'll go.
Do it.
I think number one issue is being able to use the glasses while you work for 8 hours a day to do your job. And the second one is being able to start using the device right away without having to develop these very complicated softwares for yourself. So I think this time around, HoloLens is trying to make sure that that happens and we have ready-to-use products and services.
Yeah. So a big thing that I'm kind of thinking about is speed and efficiency,
Right.
and then accuracy, right? And so I want to be positive and say yes, right? Because currently there are systems in place that can really, really actively speed someone's work mentality up, because there's the whole idea of put an AI chip in someone's brain. But if you can put an AR headset on someone's brain, can do object recognition and can pull up a bunch of data on it, you become an expert really, really quick. And that saves a ton of money, right? So I'd say yes in some certain elements like that.
Okay, let's. So you're saying glasses are ready. Everybody at work is wearing them.
I'm trying
they
to
are
be
working
positive.
They're working all day.
No, but I'm saying that there are some certain use cases that do exist today that are being
Okay,
fulfilled.
so let's talk about that, and I'm hoping we can have like a good, real conversation around the hardware, because I think it's important. On the enterprise side, what are the use cases that really allow for the glasses for today, the glasses that are on the market today, to shine? What are those use cases? What are the ones that allow for the hardware to sing the loudest right now?
It should. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you guys all have mics, so just feel free
jump
to.
at it.
All right. So what I'm seeing is that the most successful apps are ones where users, employees, are being lent the glasses. I don't yet. So I was at Microsoft in '89, and I spent 20 years at Microsoft, and I saw how at the beginning it was about trying to sell to CTOs and failing, and seeing this kind of pull phenomena actually coming from the end users. I think that we're going to see the same kind of trajectory with glasses. So today, the end users aren't pulling, right? So I see the opportunities being things like training, things like MRO, maintenance and repair operations, things like marketing. All of those we're selling today to customers. That in itself brings challenges because it means that the glasses aren't being used by one person. So if I'm doing training with AR glasses, then I have to be ready for the fact that on the hour, every hour, a different person's going to pull them on. They've got a different IPD. Some are wearing eyeglasses, some aren't. Batteries are going to run out. So they kind of become this utility device that you have to kind of hand to people when they walk in and take away when they walk out. That's going to change once we have that end user pull and everybody has a pair of AR glasses, but not yet.
So from our experience to talking with customers, we're doing proof of concept with company in like automotive. We're talking with medical use case. What we realize there's two large use case which is need AR in training. One is training, one is 3D data visualization or collaborative visualization of objects. So, and there are the baseline of the hardware are there, but there need improvement in a lot of things. Like for example, people to make those two use cases work well, people need really good large field of view, high transparency, because they need to see if they're working on an engine, if they're doing medical data visualization or doing like tourist, they need to able to see the object behind that. And for also another case for visualization, we talk with some architecture companies. They really need the salesperson to able to see the user's eye, so they need to able to make eye contact at the same time during the talk. Right now, when they wear AR, VR, they put it on and see the model and put it off and then start talking. So yeah, that's just our experience.
Okay, great insight. And Aysegul, I know from V1 to V2, it's clear that you listen to customers for the HoloLens. Can you maybe share some of those insights on how and on what changed and possibly why?
A lot of things changed, but one thing, the comfort level has changed. Now, the size, the weight of the HoloLens haven't changed that much, but the feeling has changed drastically because the center of gravity moved towards the back to make it evenly distributed to your head. And the other thing is, I love so much, is being able to flip it up. So if you're doing something, you need the information, but then if you need to take a break, you can do that. And finally, I mentioned the software. It is a humongous learning curve, and there are not many agencies out there today that will create what you need. And being able to use, ready to use some of the software have been very important.
Preston, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the software on the solution side? Any insight there in working with clients or understanding the landscape on what some of the needs are there and how they butt up against the hardware?
Yeah, so the ideas are broad, and they're these big ideas, and a lot of the time we bite off a little bit more than we can chew. So with some of these concepts in industrial and enterprise, you might have this idea of something that seems quite simple, but you need a gigantic infrastructure to set up in order to make that simple thing work, right? You need to be able to have an entire server set up that's mapped the entire building, that has a relocalization point for every single part of that place to do one simple thing you thought was so easy. So I think it comes back to setting up that infrastructure, essentially, that is it's hard teaching that.
I see. And overall, just in the demand of the enterprise, and I know it must differ per sector, but are you seeing more assisted reality type devices in market, or a demand for more robust mixed reality solutions? So more like the Google Glass Vuzix versus like the HoloLens, and this just a question on like just trying to help the audience understand kind of where the market is at generally. Anybody want to take that?
I'm not sure if I understand.
Yeah, one more time.
Oh, just in terms of like the devices, the smart glasses that are being used by enterprise clients, are they more assisted reality devices, meaning like monocular devices like Google Glass, or is the demand mixed reality devices?
I think the answer is definitely that today, enterprises are demanding those assisted reality devices. So you look at the success of people like Vuzix, you look at the success of people like RealWare. Why are they so successful? Because you can take an application from an iPad and you can put it here. So it's not really a new technology, it's a hands-free old technology. Whereas if you want to start creating, say, a training experience which involves avatars or involves volumetric scanning with a Kinect or whatever, that's a whole new technology world for a lot of these customers. And so that's why people like us have got to be evangelists to teach people about that new world. Otherwise, they're going to stay with the kind of the 2D experience in 3D.
Got it. Got it. And before we move on to talk a little bit about the consumer space, what are some of the must-haves for this the smart glass market to break wide open within the enterprise on the hardware side? Some of the technical limitations that need to be freed up, some of the advancements that need to be made. What's the wish list in order to again get to that point where it's 8 hours, everybody has a pair of glasses, and this becomes just as common as a laptop or a tool? And Kelly, I think you mentioned a little bit of some of them, right? The field of view is one of them.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I think there's a couple things. One of the largest bottleneck for those, but not the only one, is the optical display performance, the field of view, and the transparency, and working both indoor, outdoor, and also like how robust this is. Like, can people, like in enterprise use case, if one device is used across 100 people or thousands of people, is all the people able to wearing this with their interpupil distance and their face size, and also like tracking a lot of other like portabilities. They can running on, like, can it run with their existing infrastructure?
Okay.
So I mean, durability is huge, right? You're gonna drop this thing a lot, and I think, like you noted there, outdoor, right? If you go wear a HoloLens and you look up in the sky, these additive displays make it quite difficult to deal with outdoor situations.
I mean, I will repeat what Nigel mentioned before. Having security and being able to use the same device between multiple people is very important, and that's very possible with the eye tracking, which is really cool. Also, it has to go for a long time, and has to be performing at the same time, no latency, and that's accuracy is very important. That's something that we hear all the time, over and over.
So in taking a look at the consumer space, what's the relationship between AR headworn at work and the consumer rollout?
Well, your enterprise customers are potentially going to be your consumers, right? The same people. The ergonomic things you do, any changes you make, they're still going to affect the same consumers, but they're going to pay for it, right?
Yeah, I think the majority of consumers are going to get their first contact of AR through enterprises. I mean, we'll see what happens with Apple, but my speculation would be that people are more likely to use AR glasses in some 2021 equivalent of an IMAX theater than they are to go to Best Buy and buy their own sets. And so it's going to be enterprises in the middle that kind of bring them to the consumers. So I actually think that the needs are going to converge.
Right.
The enterprise is a very good preparation for the consumer because enterprise market have more well-defined needs, and it's actually very scalable. For example, like if you're working with museums or tourist site or schools education, that could be a way to, like you don't directly sell to the consumer, you sell to agencies, but the user will be consumer. They can get their hands on and understanding the technology, and they can get feedback experience from consumer through enterprise.
And so it's interesting, actually, I think, Preston, you were talking about how the enterprise clients are, in fact, consumer clients after all. So it just kind of made me think about where you all had mentioned the majority of the enterprise space is, which is on more of the monocular display, the 2D scenario, Nigel, as you put it. So it's interesting to think that if we were at that inflection point that Mike was talking about, what are the masses getting acclimated to now, and what would that possible rollout look like if 2020 is the year for consumer glasses, meaning perhaps it's a monocular display because that's what they're used to at work. If you look back at like a lot of the technologies that became consumer technologies, they did begin at work. The smartphone, the phone, for example, the smartphone is a good example of that with BlackBerry. And so if we were to pull the trigger today, and 2020 is the year, does that mean then it's a monocular display? Because that's what the predominant device is at work. That's a big question. So what do you think about 2020? That's, as Mike mentioned right from the top, there's still this very strong rumor that 2020 is the year that everybody's going to have glasses on their face. Are we really at that point? Let's have an honest conversation about that.
Okay. I think we could be very close. I think the problem that we have initially is that we have a novelty device that's incredibly expensive that we are pricing at a point that feels like it needs to be a necessary device, right? And the novelty element of that is not to be undersold. I mean, I think that's a great thing. But I think that this device has to enable a lot more AI features that are totally incapable with a phone to make them viable at that price point. A lot of times people come up with these ideas and say, oh, it's going to be amazing on this AR headset. And I'm like, you could do that today with your phone, right? You've got a camera on there. You've got a pass-through system. Maybe it's not stereo. But I think another really important thing to think about is that, when the iPhone came out, Uber didn't exist. And some of these apps that we kind of find fundamental to the iPhone, they weren't there, right? So those more needed use cases will exist. It's just who's going to put the platform there first, right? Could it be the fanboy Apple scenario, which, yeah, we'll see.
Nigel, any thoughts on that? I know you had mentioned already you think that 2020 seems to be more of the movie theater model.
Yeah, that's my opinion. So I would expect that Apple at the beginning will be more of a HUD for your mobile phone. We'll see. But I also think it's going to be the year that a lot of consumers try AR for the first time and do so in order to get immersive experiences. So whether that's in a training course, I spoke at a conference 2 weeks ago to about 100 doctors who are in the space of behavioral therapy. And they want kids with autism and kids with Down syndrome to be able to learn about life using augmented reality. And these guys have got no interest in the technology. They don't really care what AR is. They just say, pull it on, and does it work? And AR works. I can take an Azure Connect, I can capture a trusted therapist for one of these kids, and in 20 minutes, I've got that capture running in Unity and running on the glasses. You compare that to kind of rigging avatars, and yet the impact it has on people is phenomenal. So I'm a real, obviously I'm passionate about this. I'm a real believer that augmented reality brings something new, and that it's not about whether the 2D thing is good or bad. It's good, it's fine, do it. But what's new is the ability to mix digital things with reality. And whether you're looking at training, or whether you're looking at healthcare, or whether you're looking at entertainment, that's going to be world-changing. But it's not going to change the world in 2021. It's going to begin to change little bits of the world in 2020. That's my opinion.
Got it.
So I think the year 2020 and also 2021 is the initial 2 years that are going to have a next generation of actual performance improvement in both enterprise and consumer AR on the hardware side, fundamentally through an improvement method of manufacture, supply chain, and device design, from both tracking, better integrations, and also display optics. And as technologists or startups or large companies in this field, what we could do to accelerating this changing is to working very closely with manufacturers, OEM, ODM, to make sure the molding process, the semiconductor process, the new thing on that are guided into the right way, adapted to AR, because a lot of those today are being used for semiconductor, being used for cell phone camera lenses. But they are all getting into AR, but a lot of those people need some directional of what AR actually need.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, and Kelly, your company is focusing on the enterprise, is that correct?
We are initially focused on enterprise.
Okay, and is that because your device is better suited for enterprise needs, or how did that decision come about?
Yeah, so for a couple things. First is we are providing the big field of view, better visual experience, and for data visualization and training are two largest use case for that. So and also so it's more interactive, and so for consumer, if we want to providing for everybody experience as a more full accessory or something, we need a lot of apps, existing platform. So we are actually talking with company in that field. But our core focus initially is more interactive content for enterprise. That's large, colorful, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So we're in Verizon. We can't have a conversation without talking about 5G, of course. 5G and edge computing is an important, critical part of the AR/VR ecosystem. And so my question to you, the panel, is what role does 5G and edge computing play in the rollout of both enterprise and consumer head-worn devices?
I mean, you're talking about data visualization. If there's a latency in a real-time data that you're receiving on a device, then it makes it unusable. So it's really, really important for the enterprise, but I'm also really excited that we can make these applications work offline with lots of edge devices. It will open up a lot of possibilities, and we will have to worry less about the performance, because then we can do cloud rendering, and that opens up a lot more doors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some people would say that multi-user gaming, things like Fortnite, have kind of taken kids away from the soccer fields and into their bedrooms. I actually think 5G will do the opposite and take them back to the soccer fields. But they'll be wearing AR glasses and playing Fortnite on the soccer field. So you look at the capabilities of things like cloudlets and edge computing and containerization. There's a real scenario where a group of people in the same geography can play the same game on the same server that's been dynamically pushed across Azure or whatever the cloud might be to the local tower. And that's incredibly powerful. I mean, the idea that you could have that kind of gaming, real-time, 5-millisecond latency experience in your local park just by turning up, you know, and that the network decides what functionality is going to be on your local tower. So I think that's how 5G will begin. And I mean, the bad thing about 5G is it won't be pervasive. We might all have the phones, but we won't have the coverage. But if you know that there's 5G coverage at that park, you'll go to that park to play Fortnite. And I think that's going to be cool.
Interesting. Questions from the audience. We have about 7 minutes, according to my clock. You must have questions. Wow. Okay. Well, my last...
We got a question.
Okay. I'm sorry, Nicole. I didn't see it on the left.
So Nicole Lazaro from... Oh, right, there we go. Nicole Lazaro from Zero Design, Zero Play. I was curious if you think about what are some new use cases that are, enabled by 5G, in the enterprise. I really like that idea of, I think we've been given some real insight about some of the market forces. But I was curious, like, what do you think will be the first thing that changes us, substantially with 5G?
So I think somebody's going to own the digital physical world, right? There will be somebody that owns that space. I think what's really interesting is that we start to create this passive and active map of the entire world, right? And I think there's a responsibility that goes along with that too, because if you think about it, if we start mapping the entire world all the time and we create something that's passive and we create something that's active, there become really cool, interesting things you can do with kind of like time travel in a way, right? If you wanted to go back in time 10 years and see the entire world as it sat on that frame. at that time. It's pretty interesting. But either way, you've got a ton of data that's going to be piped out and piped in. And as you mentioned, the cloud rendering is some pretty cool stuff. If we can do some ray trace elements and render that as frames, it's pretty incredible.
I think one of the biggest improvement of 5G to AR is low latency. So by decreased latency, one use case could be improved a lot through that is telepresence or remote collaboration working. Like no matter is people models or 3D models being shared viewing by 2 people remotely or multiple person, this part with a lower latency, they can get active feedback or even eye contact through this better. This could enable a lot of collaborative use case.
Right, like telepresence, for example.
And we do run a smaller version of our machine learning models in the device because they're limited, but we will have no limitation if we have the power to do that in the cloud, as well as the rendering. So AI is very powerful, object detection, and there's a lot more you could do.
Another question from the crowd?
Hey, for consumer applications, what do you think would be the primary mode of interacting with these devices?
So you're talking in realms of hand tracking, controller. I mean, I think it's very interesting, but it even gets even more interesting when you start to think of the interactions and the way that they interact with the other people around them too, right? Where the multi-user case inside of that, and how do you deal with all of those interactions synced up? A game controller, yeah, with Fortnite. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I'm biased because HoloLens 2 has amazing hand tracking, so people can interact with holograms like if they would interact with anything that's 3D in their real environment. So there's no learning curve. As soon as somebody puts it on, they try to touch it, or like they see their corners. Okay, maybe I can scale this, and that's really, really powerful if you ask me. But also it comes with a lot of AI capabilities that allows you to use voice command, but that's always a good option for accessibility purposes as well. But it's not the primary way we would interact, I think, because of the security.
So I think so. You mentioned consumer, right? I think for consumer, there's one important thing for interacting with this device, which is easiness and privacy. So there's 2 interaction methods I would really hope that doesn't fully exist or today. At least there's development going on. One is whispering. So talking about voice, like what about if I don't have to talk very loud, I can just whispering, like moving my mouse, and this can recognize out from there. And if I can do a direct input on my fingertip or something like this, and able to control the input through that, that would be really good for if I'm on a subway or something. I don't have to like waving very large in front of me, but it will be a hybrid method.
I think I think we're still waiting for some major new technology. I mean, you think back to the early days of things like the mice that were being developed at like Xerox PARC, and this is like 50 years ago. But people didn't really know how people would wish to interact with 2D UI. Well, we're now dealing with 3D UI. I mean, no question. Yeah, gestures are great. They're really good. Sometimes hand controllers are good. But I think there's something out there that's kind of haptic, like has got a gyroscope inside of it. I think there's something still to come, maybe from one of these people. What do you say?
Mind control.
Mind control, right. But you still want something that gives you feedback. I think humans like that. They like the pushback, the...
Well, I got to push back now because we're running out of time.
Very good.
So thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for being here talking about a really important topic within augmented reality. Big round of applause. And I'm going to hand this back to Mr. Mike Boland.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
So before we go to our fireside chat, we actually have a surprise guest. Tom alluded to this earlier, an announcement from Eighth Wall. Come on up. Just really quick announcement in between the sessions. Eric, why don't you take it away? If we get that video queued up. Video. There you go.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Emily, for hosting. So I really appreciate the opportunity to say something quick. Many of you know Eighth Wall. We've had a really soft spot in our hearts for AWE Nite SF. We've had a number of our announcements here. We've had a number of good connections here and community building here. But it just so happens that today we had an incredibly major announcement for ourselves. We announced kind of the first of its kind cloud editor and hosting platform for creating reality. You know, Eighth Wall is known for its AR engine, which is our computer vision technology that allows AR to happen on your web browser, on your phone, with no apps and no downloads. And we've been able to get kind of AR to be so seamless for being able to consume these experiences. But one of the things we noticed is like it was a challenge to build these experiences. You needed a web server, you needed development, you needed a website to host it on. There were SSL certs and understanding. And we wanted to make the development and creation of AR content as simple as the consumption of web AR content. And so we've been working on this for quite some time. And just today, we had our first announcement. So we're going to show just a quick video of what it looks like. And for anyone interested or already using it, it's launched. It's available on Eighth Wall's website, and you can start building today. Thanks a lot.
So thank you, Eric. We'll be excited to see what developers do with that. So next we're going to go to our final segment, which is a fireside chat led by Amy LaMeyer with Avi Bar-Zeev. If you guys want to come up. While they're coming up here, one other kind of point of clarification, which I failed to make earlier. We're talking a lot about 2020 for Apple glasses. I mentioned it earlier. We talked about it on the panel just now. One thing to keep in mind is the distinction between announcement and launch. Particularly if you look at Apple's hardware cycles, where usually sometime in the fall, late year, they'll make an announcement and then it enters the market the following year. So that's something to keep in mind when we're kind of speculating this stuff. The numbers I showed earlier are actually based on a probably admittedly rather conservative viewpoint with respect to all these 2020 rumors, with a late 2021 announcement that a 2022 actual market launch. So that's something to keep in mind is those cycles as we're looking at all this stuff. So why don't you guys take it away? I think I have your mic, Avi. So take it away, Amy.
It is such a pleasure to be here with you. You have 25 years of experience in, like, with every major tech organization working in the AR space, and now you're CTO at a new company doing a new thing. So thank you for sitting here and having a conversation with me about AR in general and headworn as well.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe give these folks a little bit more of a background of where you've been and where you are now.
Okay. So yeah, it's been over 25 years, like coming up on 30 almost, but 25 is a nice round number. I started with a VR startup in, I guess, 1992, which was way early and it didn't go anywhere. But through this whole succession of jobs, I managed to be in some really great places throughout the whole time. That first job ran out of money, but we built a really cool demo that a company called SGI, which made these graphic supercomputers, saw, and they happened to be working with Disney, and they said, you got to hire this guy. And so I got into this really cool secret project at Disney, which was Aladdin's Magic Carpet VR ride, which was awesome. It had its own HMD, $100,000 HMD, and Disney quality art and audio, and it was really really great first real job to have, and that led to doing all sorts of really cool VR stuff. It got me involved with some people from SGI who later started a company called Intrinsic Graphics, and that company also didn't survive, but it spawned the company that built Google Earth. So that was called Keyhole, And so I got to be the first person working on Google Earth. And so that was awesome, and Google did really well with that. I think it's somewhere upwards of maybe 2 billion downloads at this point. You know, at the last I heard it was a 1.5 billion or so, but just a pretty amazing reach for a product that is basically a virtual globe that lets you see the world. But it was a lot of fun to work on, and just continued. That was actually my first real AR project. That one, you can think of it as an AR browser, as a browser for the real world, just in the same way that Netscape was a browser for the web, with the goal of bringing all the content together. And so it got me thinking about all these things, and the name Reality Prime was a name that's kind of stuck with me the whole time. It was originally my name for cyberspace. I'd written a novel, and in the novel I called cyberspace Reality Prime, because of course I had to be different. And it was also the name of a blog that I had forever, and that blog also coincidentally got me hired at Microsoft. And so somebody at Microsoft had been reading my blog, and I had been blogging about how horrible of an idea was it to mash up two of the things I had done. I'd worked on Second Life, building the code that builds all the objects in Second Life, and I'd also worked on Google Earth. And then some people were saying, bring those together, have avatars walking around. It was a terrible idea, terrible, terrible. So I blogged extensively about why that was, and Microsoft had secretly been working on exactly that, and they were having some problems. And so they brought me in to try to help redesign that. It ultimately didn't go anywhere, but it let me in the door to meet the right people to get into the group that was building the HoloLens before anybody knew what it was. It was nobody really knew what AR was. Nobody wanted it. All we were supposed to do was figure out what the next generation Xbox was supposed to be, right? But they wanted something that would scare them. They wanted something that would be different. And so this is what we came up with. So I got to work on the very first versions of that and build the first prototypes. Had left in 2012, went to Amazon, and what I got to prototype there was now called Echo Frames. So that just got released recently. I could finally talk about it. So that was another sort of, after working on the high end of AR, the thing that has all the bells and whistles, I went and said, let's do something that is a little more approachable. That could be AR that we could release tomorrow, and it could scale tomorrow. And so it was all about building these audio glasses, which I think are really cool. And the last thing that I can just touch on but can't talk about is I left Amazon and went to Apple for almost 3 years and worked on secret projects at Apple that are in my areas of interest. And so it's always interesting to hear people talking about what they are or aren't going to do. I can't say. So I have no comments.
That's great. It's so hopeful for people that are bringing, just starting their career to see what yours has done and where it's led you. And obviously you have a lot of experience with new technologies and not necessarily knowing if it's the right time for those technologies. So does now feel different?
Yeah, now is different in a lot of ways. I mean, compared to 1992,
Yeah.
we had all the same ideas, right? I was writing about this novel that I never published, had AR contact lenses in it, right? So I was like, this is what we need, right? This will solve our problems because we can just close our eyes and we're in VR and go anywhere, and you open our eyes and we're in the real world and we can see everything. And
I would read that novel.
I should still work on it. I did publish a few, I published short stories, but I never quite got the novel to the point where I thought it was great. So it found it easier just to work on this stuff and say, let me just try to help build it instead of just writing about it. But now it feels different for a couple of reasons. One, on the VR side, of course, it was cell phones that pushed all the technology costs way, way down to make things like the Quest possible. Right? That would not have been possible. And I think some of those same improvements are making it easier to be able to do AR. The challenges, and for example, one of the challenges that almost nobody talks about, maybe John Haddock knows this challenge really well, is thermals. Like, people talk about weight and field of view and all this stuff, but just think about having something on your head for 18 hours a day that's warm. No one's going to want to do that. So if this thing is emitting more than a couple of
we all
watts,
felt that with the Samsung Gear.
So, but only for a little while, right? And just imagine all day now you have this heat generator on your head. And so what is the main contributor to heat is essentially waste in silicon. I actually have a friend who described, as a machine learning person, who described his work is turning data into heat, right? And that's exactly what's going on. And so the better the silicon gets, the smaller the factor, smaller the process in the silicon, the less heat is wasted, and the better things get. And so a lot of the things that we want are just strictly gated on these silicon processes. When they get better and better, we can have more processing on the head with the same battery or even less battery, but less heat, which makes it viable. As of now, it would be hard to say that anybody could make a great small product that could run for 18 hours a day and you would be happy with it. It would have to really be off most of the time. And you see that. You see that with watches. Watches work because they're mostly off. If they had to run at full speed all the time, your wrist would melt.
Yeah, it's interesting. So maybe let's keep digging into a couple other challenges. As we were talking about 5G earlier, and obviously we're in the 5G building.
I can feel it. It's sort of resonating.
So I used to work at a company called Akamai Technology, so we helped to scale the internet. But bandwidth and performance and all of that is something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I see it as a huge enabler to all immersive technology. Do you as well?
Yeah, I mean, especially for AR, because the headsets have to be light. And so you could argue that whatever the state of the art of rendering is, we're going to want the headsets to be kind of close to that. And they may not have enough power to do it. So being able to offload that, I mean, one of the very first patents I wrote at Microsoft was about how to make the glasses a distributed process, where you might have something, in this case in the room, it would be your Xbox, that was doing most of the work, and the glasses would be doing that last, microsecond reform factor of where am I, what am I looking at, and doing that fix-up. But a lot of the work would happen off the box, and that's still, I think, a good way to look at it. The problem is, and I think people working on 5G know this really well, it's not just about the bandwidth, it's about the simultaneity of multiple users. You can use Wi-Fi today and beam a pretty good image, and you see these products for VR but try to use 2 or 3 in the same room and you're dead. And Bluetooth. We used to joke about demoitis. The demo always fails when you're about to show it, but there's an actual phenomenon, because if a bunch of people come to see your demo and they all have Bluetooth devices on, they kill your demo if you're using Bluetooth. And so you got to make, Steve Jobs famously made the whole audience turn off their devices so that he could do his demo. You have to pretty much do that. And so of course we need better networking that sustains itself for hundreds of people sitting in the same space using devices at the same time, or else it's just gonna fall over.
And the other use case that I heard that I thought was super interesting, but I hadn't originally thought of, is battery life. Like if you can transfer more data faster, right, or process all things better, right, then the battery life should last longer, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a function of how much energy do your radios need to use to transmit the same amount of information? Maybe they can do more information faster, but if they are using a technology that's optimized for a very large distance, they might be operating at a high power, whereas if the technology is optimized to be in close range, and maybe it can beamform so that it's only sending power in your direction at a given time, that can save a lot of energy, both on the receiver and transmitter side and on the rest of it. So there's a lot of these things have to come together in order to make this work. That's not to say you couldn't do something cool in wireless today or even something cool in tethered today, but the future obviously has to be wireless.
Yeah, I agree. Any other challenges we should touch on tonight?
Oh, what didn't I talk about there? I think that's probably good.
This will have a good ending, I promise.
Yeah, there were a few other things I have comments on I probably shouldn't say anything about, so
okay.
I'll do this.
All right. Then we'll talk about Hopeful. Tilt 5. Someone brought it up earlier today. I bought one. I demoed it like 6 months ago. I'm excited about it. Thoughts?
Oh, it's great. I'm a huge supporter. I bought 4.
Yeah, here's me. I got one.
I have a family of 4, and I'm really excited. My oldest is autistic, and I can't get him to wear headphones or glasses of any kind. But I'm hoping that when I can bring the glasses close and he can start to see the image through the glasses, that he'll be okay with me putting these on. And I'm going to then write some apps for him to work specifically for him. And I've had some really good luck with him customizing software for his needs, and I'm really happy to do that. So I'm super excited. I've known Jerry forever. I should mention that I'm an advisor to Kura as well, who was up there on the last one. But I've known Jerry forever. I want them to be successful, and I think the Kickstarter has been super successful. I think that we need to see that a follow-on success in the market, which I think we will see. And I want to see that thing at Best Buy. I want to see that thing be the thing that you do on a Friday night with your friends, is to sit around a table and play these games, and it'll be the Monopoly, you know, of a year from now or 2 years from now when it peaks. And I think that she has a window of opportunity. The company has a window of opportunity to come in and sell something that is practical, that everybody can use. It's super easy to get into. There's almost no learning curve, and it's cheap. It's relatively cheap. They were charging for the Kickstarter $300.
Yep.
If they can get the scale up even higher, you know, right now, I think they've officially probably sold more units than Magic Leap at this point, which is great. If they can get,
She tweeted recently that she didn't actually.
Oh.
Yeah, like
Really?
literally in five
I didn't
minutes
see
ago.
that yet,
Yeah.
but I'm only
I was
guessing.
paying attention to the panel, I promise.
I've only heard other people talk about the numbers for the other company, but well, yet, sure, but ultimately, I think it'll do really well, and it just shows that if you pick an application, pick something that's specific, and really nail that use case, you can find a lot of people who are going to be excited about that. And I think that's the same advice I give to other companies. Not that I'm an official advisor for her, but for other companies that I do work with, I say the same thing: pick your use case, solve it, and just be the best at that one thing.
So I know that we want to go do demos, speaking of those things, but one last question. So you're going to be at South by Southwest this year?
Yes.
And speaking?
Yes,
So
first time.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
It'll be fun.
I've never actually gone to the conference, and
Oh,
I'm
it's
actually going to,
amazing.
you know, go and actually speak. And the topic is something near and dear to my heart, because having spent this long helping to get AR off the ground, I also feel a responsibility to make sure that it doesn't suck, and to make sure it's not abusive. And so I've spent a lot of time on the privacy issue. In fact, I would have probably never gone to work at Apple had it not been for Tim Cook standing up in the San Bernardino case and saying no, that we're not going to crack our phones for one case. And I really respected that, and I learned a lot about privacy. I knew a lot, but I learned a ton more about privacy when I worked there. And so I've written some articles about it. I wrote one that made it into Vice, Motherboard, around eye tracking. It's just a technology that is coming, whether we like it or not, and it has huge implications for privacy. If you're concerned about what Facebook is doing today, just wait until they can basically read your mind. And so the talk I'm going to give is about the future has really two paths. There's the path of which we all talk about superpowers and how we're super enabled with all these technologies. That also has some of its own issues. Are we equally enabled? Are some people more enabled than others? That has some challenges. But also the dystopian side of it of how do we prevent monopolies from abusing the power and using it against us. And it's really going to be a call to action for what we can do as consumers and as technologists to help build the future we want to build. I'm a huge believer in not just waiting for things to happen and not just writing books that kind of give you ideas of what the future is, but jumping in and really trying to steer the future to the most positive outcome for ourselves, for our kids. And so the talk is going to be really at the heart of that topic of how do we make sure it comes out well.
And the reason I'm hopeful about that is that we're thinking about it now before the technology exists, right? Instead of waiting until it exists. And we won't figure it all out, but at least we're having these discussions now. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront. And thanks for talking tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks, guys. That was very illuminating. Avi's going to be fielding many questions out here about Apple and the glasses, of course. No, that was awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Amy. So that actually concludes our program. Thank you for sticking with us. We only went about 15 minutes over, so we still have a lot of time for the demos.